We know a lot. And those of you, I mean, that are going through teacher prep and whatnot, we know how to set up rooms. We know how to design language introductions. We know how to do early literacy. For dual language children, not so much. We have a research base, but it is not near, it's, you know, if you go back 20 years or more, you find maybe 3 or 4 studies that dealt with bilingual education and early childhood together. So our research base is it's just beginning to grow. We're starting to really understand what these issues are. And as a country, and certainly as a state, for California, we haven't decided even what our goals are. You know, what is it we want? Do we want our children to truly become bilingual, biliterate, bicultural? Do we want all of our students? I mean, that's sort of a values question that you have to go through at every state, at every community, because once you decide on that, then some of these other policies and practices are going to flow from it. But we're still, and California is a great example, it's kind of schizophrenic about people at the highest levels will say we have a language deficit, but we don't believe in bilingual ed. You know, I mean, it's like people don't kind of put it together in terms of the assets that our families and children bring in and how we achieve some of these bigger goals.
What we see here is a mother in India, and she's speaking Koro, which is a newly discovered language, and she's talking to her baby. What this mother and the 800 people who speak Koro in the world understand that to preserve this language, they need to speak it to the babies. And therein lies a critical puzzle. Why is it that you can't preserve a language by speaking to you and I, to the adults? Well, it's got to do with your brain. What we see here is that language has a critical period for learning. The way to read this slide is to look at your age on the horizontal axis. We've done that. And you'll see on the vertical your skill at acquiring a second language. The babies and children are geniuses until they turn 7, and then there's a systematic decline. After puberty, we fall off the map. No scientists dispute this curve, but laboratories all over the world are trying to figure out why it works this way. Work in my lab is focused on the first critical period in development, and that is the period in which babies try to master which sounds are used in their language. We think by studying how the sounds are learned, we'll have a model for the rest of language, and perhaps for critical periods that may exist in childhood for social, emotional, and cognitive development. Golden age of knowledge about the child's brain development. We're going to be able to see a child's brain as they experience an emotion, as they learn to speak and read, as they solve a math problem, as they have an idea. And we're going to be able to invent brain-based interventions for children who have difficulty learning. Just as the poets and writers described, we're going to be able to see, I think, that wondrous openness, utter and complete openness of the mind of a child. In investigating the child's brain, we're going to uncover deep truths about what it means to be human. And in the process, we may be able to help keep our own minds open to learn for our entire lives.
Some of the additional research that they're doing in their laboratory is allowing them to, when they're designing a screening tool for children who may have autism, because they've concluded that the human brain is hardwired to learn language. And the reason they've concluded that is that when infants are born, not only do they orient to the sound of their mom's voice, which we know, but they also orient to the language they have heard prenatally, independent of their mom's voice. So they have heard and processed the sounds of language prenatally, and they'll show preferential attention. And the other thing that they do is, when an infant's in a room, there are doors opening and closing, water flowing, etc. There are lots of ambient sounds that are not attached to language. If an infant hears a sound that is represented in any phonology system, in any language, anywhere, they will orient toward it, preferentially over a sound that's not language-based. Through evolution, some prioritizing around attention and language, because that's what we have to do. We have to learn language in order to develop our human capacities.